In today's class, we'll study the difference between a conventional file system and database management system, right? So why did we go for a database management system? So there are a lot of limitations in a file processing system. So to avoid and to overcome the limitations of file processing system, we have gone for DBMS, right? So the limitations of file processing system is like we have data redundancy and data inconsistency, right? So what do you mean by data redundancy? So data redundancy means duplication of data, right? So in file processing system, there is chances of duplication of data. So whenever you have multiple copies of the data that do not agree, it leads to data inconsistency, right? So duplication of data is known as data redundancy. Since files are being created by different people, right, over a period of time, and it is written in several different programming languages, there's a possibility that the same information is duplicated in several places, right? So whenever there is data redundancy, it leads to high storage and access cost of the data. So data redundancy may lead to data inconsistency, since multiple copies of the same data may not agree, right? So for example, you register with our institute. So whenever you join, the institute will get some information like your contact number, address, will get some profile details of your student. So what happens over a period of time is that you change your contact number or you change your email ID, right? So what happens is that the case of conventional file processing system, once you change your contact number and you update your file processing system, the chances are there like the old value may not be updated, and you have multiple copies of the same data, right? So I have a contact number of a student while he registers for this course, and while he leaves the institute, he would have updated his contact number, and I have multiple copies of his contact number which do not agree, right? I may have his old contact number and as well as some new contact number. Whenever I have multiple copies of the same data that do not agree, it leads to data inconsistency. Again, data redundancy, the issue is that it leads to a lot of storage and access cost, right? So whereas in the case of database management system, like we have we are going to store the information in a table like format, where each and every row is known as record, and each and every record is uniquely identified by a primary key, right? So your roll number is a primary key which can be used to uniquely identify each and every student in the department. So once you join, you give your contact number to the institute, and later whenever we want to update your contact details, so I'll be updating based on your roll number. So the thing is that there will not be any data redundancy. There's no chance for duplication of data. Since there is no chance for duplication of data, there is no chance for data inconsistency, right? So this is the major advantage of database management system. You can ensure that there is no data redundancy or duplication of data. Since there is no data redundancy, we don't have data inconsistency, right? So the second disadvantage in file processing system is that difficulty in accessing the data, right? So for example, in an university, the clerks, he needs to find the name of all students who live in a postal code or a particular area. The clerk requests the data processing department to generate a list, right? So generally, if you look into the file processing system, you would have done some programs working with the files. The file is embedded in the application program that access it, right? So the clerk wants, for example, in an university, in academic department, a clerk wants to retrieve the students who reside in a particular postal area. He will ask the data processing department to generate a list, right? Suppose the program is written and he is able to have a record of all the students who are residing in a particular location. Later, the same clerk needs to trim the list to include only the students who have taken at least 60 credit hours. right? So you want to generate a list which which gives you a report about the students who have registered for at least 60 credit hours. So the thing is that the conventional file processing system does not allow the data to be retrieved in a convenient and efficient manner. So we need to go for more responsive data retrieval system for general use, right? So here the thing is that the data file is embedded in the application program. So you need to write an application program to retrieve the information from the data, right? So later over a period of time, you may need more information from the data. You need to rewrite the application program continuously. So the thing is that conventional file processing approach, it does not allow you to retrieve the data in a convenient and efficient manner, right? So the third disadvantage of the third disadvantage of file processing system is going to be data isolation, right? So data isolation means data is spread across multiple files, and files may be in different formats. It's known as data isolation, right? So if you consider an enterprise which is there for more than 50 years, what happens is that data is scattered in various files, and files may be in different formats, and they may be written in different programming languages, right? So writing new application program to retrieve the appropriate data is going to be difficult, right? So for example, you consider an enterprise which is there for more than 50 years, right? Like for example, you consider an enterprise like Bata that deals with footwears. So they will be storing the data in different files over a period of time. They will be storing it in some legacy files, right? They would have used some spreadsheets to store the data, right? So data is scattered across various files, and the files may be in different formats. So writing new application program to retrieve the appropriate data is going to be difficult. So these are the disadvantages of file processing system, right? So let us discuss the major drawbacks in a file processing system. Integrity problem, right? So for example, the data value stored in a database must satisfy certain type of consistency constraint, right? So for example, in a bank, the balance of a account should always be greater than 1,000 rupees, right? So for example, a bank, it puts some constraint like the account of a particular person should be always greater than 1,000 rupees, right? Then we need to write some code for enforcing the constraint in the case of a conventional file processing system, right? Over a period of time, some more constraint is added, like some more constraint is added. It is very difficult to enforce the constraints in the case of domain integrity constraints or referential integrity constraints in the case of a file processing system, whereas it is easy to enforce integrity constraints in the case of database management system, right? So for example, account number should be integer, account name should be character data type, right? So these are some of the constraints which can be easily enforced during the schema design. Similarly, a bank, it may have some constraint like the account balance should be greater than 1,000 rupees. The account holder should be residing in that particular locality or in that particular city, right? So for example, you start an account in SBI Trichy, SBI NIT Trichy. They have their own constraint, like only the students of NIT Trichy will be able to have their account in NIT Trichy, right? So they can have their own constraint. Or people in Trichy alone, they can with address Trichy alone, they can start an account in NIT Trichy, right? So you have a lot of constraints. It is very difficult to enforce the constraints in the case of a file processing system, whereas in the case of DBMS, database management system, it is easy for you to enforce the constraints, right? So that's the advantage of database management system. Now, right, uh, now let us discuss about this atomicity problem, right? So atomicity problem is uh, it's a very popular problem that is addressed by database management system. So what do you mean by atomicity problem? So for example, you are going to pay your tuition fees to NIT Trichy, right? So you are going to start a transaction. So you are going to debit the tuition fees from your account and you are going to credit it into NIT Trichy Institute account, right? Right. So here the transaction involves both debit operation and credit operation. So the amount is debited from the student's account and it is being credited into the institute account, right? So computers are electromechanical devices and they are subject to failure, right? Like let us assume that the amount is debited from your account, or let us assume that the amount is debited from the student account, but before crediting it into the institute account, there is a failure. There may be some power failure, hardware failure, software failure, or network failure. What happens? The money is lost, which results in an inconsistent database state, right? So if the money is lost, the transaction is a failure and it results in an inconsistent state of your database, right? So however, this can be avoided in a database management system. It ensures that the transaction is atomic. So the atomicity property guarantees that a transaction occurs completely or not at all, right? So transaction is atomic means, for example, some amount is debited, it means that the same amount is credited to some other account, right? So you pay your tuition fees or you pay your electricity bills. What happens is that the amount debited from your account should be credited into the institute account, right? The transaction should occur completely or not at all. It is known as atomicity. So database management systems, they guarantee this atomicity property, right? So whereas conventional file processing system, it does not guarantee the atomicity property, right? So basically we have four properties of database: atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. So atomicity is an important property of a database. It ensures that a transaction occurs completely or not at all, right? So we have an example like consider a program to transfer $500 from account balance of department A to account balance of department B, right? So if a system failure occurs during the execution of your program, right? So we have a program to transfer $500 from account A to account B, right? There is a failure. The system failure occurs during the transfer of $500 from account A to account B. What happens? The money is lost, right? The system failure may be due to hardware failure, or it may be due to software failure, or it may be due to network failure, power failure, right? So it may have different reasons for failure. So what happens in a conventional file processing system is that the money is lost and it results in an inconsistent state, inconsistent variable state or database state. So we need to ensure that there is no atomicity problem, right? So database management system, they take care of this atomicity problem by ensuring that transaction is going to be atomic. The fund transfer should be atomic. It should happen entirely or not at all. So it is essential that if some amount is being debited, it should be credited, right? So either both operations, debit and credit, they occur together, or both of them, they neither occur. It's known as atomicity problem, right? So atomicity problem is handled by database management system, whereas file processing system, they cannot handle this atomicity problem, right? So the next issue in conventional file processing system is that for the sake of the overall performance, right, to improve the throughput of the system and to have a faster response time, many systems, they allow multiple users to update the data simultaneously, right? So we allow multiple users to pay the tuition fees simultaneously, right? So SBI iCollect, it would allow multiple users to make transactions simultaneously for an NIT account, right? So what happens when there is some concurrent access anomaly, right? So for example, consider a department A with account balance $10,000. If two department clerks, they are going to debit the account balance by say $500 and $100 respectively of department A at most exactly at the same time. So the result of the concurrent transactions may leave the account balance in an inconsistent state, right? So if two programs run concurrently, the account balance of department A may contain either $9,500 or $9,900 rather than correct value of $9,400, right? So to guard against this possibility, the system must maintain some form of supervision, right? So there must be some log-based protocol which should ensure that the transactions occur sequentially one after the another, right? So once they are going to access a shared variable, we need to ensure that if the boarded transactions they are going to read a variable value, they can make it parallelly. Whereas if one transaction is going to boarded transactions, they try to update the shared variable, it should be through some synchronization, right? So this is known as concurrent access anomaly problem, and this problem is handled in database management system. It has some log-based protocols to ensure that transactions they occur concurrently without any conflicts. Whereas in the case of file processing system, we have a lot of concurrent access anomaly, right? So multiple users try to access a particular account at the same time. It may lead to concurrent access anomaly, right? So multiple users they try to debit the same account or credit the same account. It may result in an inconsistent state in the case of a file processing system, whereas in the case of database management system, the concurrent access anomaly problem is being taken care, right? So we go for concurrent execution of transactions to improve the throughput of the system. So that many transactions can occur simultaneously, but it has its own limitation. We have this concurrent access anomaly problem, and this can be overcome by some log-based protocols in the case of database management systems, right? So the next issue in file processing system is that security, right? So the security problem is that not every user of the database should be able to access all the data, right? So different users of your database system should be given different perspective view of the same information, right? So in database management system, we have views or virtual tables. So views or virtual tables, it helps you to give different perspective view of the information to different types of users, right? So for example, a person working in an academic department in an university should not be able to access the finance details in that university. Similarly, a person working in the finance department should not be able to access the academic details of the students in the university, right? So you need to give different perspective view of the same database to different types of users who are accessing the database, right? So it's very difficult to enforce security issues in the case of a file processing system, whereas in the case of database management system, we have this views or virtual tables, right? So views or virtual tables, it helps you to give a different perspective view of the same database to different types of users, right? So for example, you are going to access your results. You will be able to access only your grade sheet in the website, right? So the thing is that each and every user or each and every student will be given different perspective view of the same database, right? So all the information, all the grade information about all the students are stored in the common table, but you will not be able to access your friend details or your neighbor details without his consent, without some password and roll number, right? So the thing is that different users should be given different perspective view of the database. So it is possible to enforce database security using virtual tables, whereas in conventional file processing system, it's very difficult to enforce this security problems, right? So these are the difficulties in the conventional file processing system. And to solve these problems, we have gone for a database management system, right?